My name is Camille Kitching. I recognize a few faces, but you might recognize mine. I am the teacher at your sister school, Rochester. But this morning, I am here with my family representing Adventist Frontier Missions. Raise your hand if you have heard of Adventist Frontier Missions. Yes, a very popular mission group. I have been affiliated with AFM for about 12 years or so, but we will get into that. This morning, service is going to be a little different. My husband and I will both be speaking. We will be sharing our testimony of how God has called us into the mission field, and we will also discuss a bit about where we're going. If you would bow your heads as I pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for your love and thank you for your mercy. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to your people here at Dot Center this morning. I ask that you would just bless us and speak through me and through Kwan. In your name, amen. Let me introduce my family. So Pastor Nate Kwan was up here. He also goes by Kwan. That's my husband. We have 3 beautiful children, Nicole, who is 8, Nathan, who is 6, and Natalie, who is 3. And this picture was taken of us last year when we were at orientation with AFM. So I'm going to go back. So our scripture this morning is coming from Romans chapter 15, verse 20. It reads, "And thus I make it my ambition to preach the gospel, not where Christ has already been named, lest I build on someone else's foundation. But as it is written, those who have never been told of him will see, and those who have never heard will understand." Now, something you should know about me, I have always wanted to be a missionary. From I was yay high, I wanted to be a missionary. I think it was probably inspired by 2 things. One, the mission stories I used to hear at church every single Sabbath. Right between Sabbath school and Divine Hour, there was the mission spotlight. And I got to hear all about stories of missionaries in the past and current missionaries. And it kind of planted a seed in my heart. That's what I wanted to do when I grew up. But I didn't exactly know how to get there. I didn't know any missionaries except the ones that were shared at in the mission spotlight. So I didn't know how to get there. There was also the fact that when I was 12 years old, my grandmother had this dream, and she told me in the dream she saw me standing in a body of water. And hundreds of people were coming towards me, and I was baptizing them. Now, in my youth, I knew that I wasn't going to be a pastor because I was actually very shy. So coming up and standing and preaching or sharing my testimony was not something I would do as a child. So I was like, I'm not going to be a pastor. So the only way that might happen is if I'm a missionary. I also saw certain characteristics that I had that led towards missions. I was never afraid, though shy to speak in front of people. I was not shy to go and knock on doors and hand out flyers and invite people to church. I did not have the opportunity to attend an Adventist school, so I went to public school, and I would always invite my friends out to church and always try to tell them about Jesus and about the Sabbath. And so they knew I was the weird kid. But nonetheless, I felt God's direction in my life. Not having an Adventist education, by the time it was time for me to go to college, I knew I must get an Adventist education. And so I decided to go to Oakwood University in Huntsville, Alabama. And within the first week of being on campus, I met a group of young people who wanted to be missionaries too. They were a part of a missionary society, and they did missions in 3 ways. They did local missions on Sabbath through the local community, where we took Sabbath service out to the impoverished youth. So I found myself that first semester teaching 4-year-olds about Jesus. Now, when I went to Oakwood, yes, I had this idea of I want to be a missionary, but as far as a career choice, I thought I was going to be a lawyer and serve the Lord that way. But within that first semester, because of teaching these 4-year-olds about Jesus, I changed my major to education. Another way they did missions was rescue missions. So I was a part of a group that responded to a lot of hurricane missions in Louisiana and Alabama. So throughout my time at Oakwood, I worked with this organization. One of the other things they did was in the summers, during our summer break, they would send a team overseas to do missions for 6 weeks. And I always wanted to do that mission, that summer mission. But my parents, though they believed that maybe one day I would be a missionary, they were not too fond of me going across the world at that time to go and serve, so they always said no. And that always disappointed me. And I mentioned 3, but there were also 4 ways that they serve. The other way, the 4th one, is that a group of students would take a year off. It was called their year of dedication to the Lord. And by the time it was my year for dedication, we were year of dedication number 7. And I signed up for that year, but I couldn't bring myself to tell my parents what I was going to do. So eventually I went and talked to the director and said, I don't think I'm gonna go, so just take my name off. I wasn't brave enough then. But I continued working with that organization and doing the local missions and the rescue missions. By the time it got to my senior year, I had almost finished my education degree, and I still had this calling that would not go away, that I'm supposed to be a missionary. And I still don't know how I'm gonna do this. That's when I was invited to a seminar put on by the theology department. And there I met a missionary, first missionary that I've ever met, first career missionary. His name was Mark Coleman, and he was from AFM. He shared his testimony of how he and his wife went to Thailand to be missionaries for 11 years, and they had their children on the mission field, and how after that time they came and went and ministered in the Republic of Guinea, West Africa for 10 years. And that meeting, that seminar changed my life, because I knew now the path that God was leading, that I see how I can be a missionary. And so when he called, he was looking for student missionaries, people who would give 1 year. I said, yes, I'm going this time. I'm about to graduate. Technically, I'm grown. My parents can't tell me I can't go this time. So I signed the dotted line, and within no time, I was filling out paperwork to go and serve overseas. At that time, my husband-to-be was in the audience. He was sitting right there. He was actually one of the people that invited Mark Coleman to come and speak. But he had no inclination, and he didn't answer the call about being a missionary, because he was never going to be a missionary. But I'll let him share that part of his testimony. Either way, shortly after that seminar, Kwan and I started a courtship. And within 6 weeks of the start of that courtship, we were engaged. But the trouble was, I knew he didn't want to be a missionary. And one of the first serious conversations we had, I remember clearly, it was after a potluck at one of our friends' house, and I sat him down and said, I'm about to graduate from Oakwood. I'm going overseas to be a missionary. When I come back, I want to get married, and then I want to go live on the mission field. And if that's not your life or what you want, then I'm asking that you kindly just, leave me alone, because it's not going to work out, because I have been called to be a missionary. He will share that he thought I was completely crazy, but again, we got engaged, so not so crazy, and we just actually celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary, so God is good. Anyway, so I did graduate from Oakwood University, and then I went overseas to the Republic of Guinea, West Africa, the same place that Mark Coleman served. And I had just a wonderful experience. We were ministering to the Susu people, who they are Wahhabist Muslims. Those are the ones where their women dress in black from head to toe. They're veiled, can't see anything, but underneath that veil, they're just the sweetest young people. They're some of my closest friends, and I'm still praying for many of them who have not given their lives to Jesus yet. But I had a wonderful time on the mission field, and God confirmed for me that, yes, you're supposed to be a missionary. This is what I want you to do with your life. My time on the mission field, however, was cut short because Ebola broke out that year in Guinea and started spreading across the world. So it was determined that the student missionary should come home. So I came home. But on my flight from Senegal to Belgium, making connections to come back right here to Minnesota, I was crying because I knew two things. God wanted me to be a missionary. This was a calling on my life. But I also knew God wanted me to marry Kwan. And I knew that he did not want to be a missionary. So this was my opportunity, and probably my only opportunity to be a missionary. And it was cut short. So I was having deep conversations with God, going, what are you doing? You're calling me, but you're also telling me this is the guy I'm supposed to marry, but you're telling me to be a missionary, and those things don't align. And so all I could do was pray and leave it in God's hands. Shortly after I came back from the mission field, we got married, and we did not go on the mission field. My mission for a while was home to our 3 children that would eventually come. And I will let Kwan come and share his story, and then I'll pick it back up after that. Thank you.
Wow, this guy Kwan is not a good guy. I'm joking. Yes, I'm pretty sure you all heard my name earlier. My name is Naquan Kitching, but everyone calls me Kwan for short. You can call me Pastor Kwan. I actually used to pastor here in Minnesota. I pastored in Minnesota Conference for 6 years. I pastored in Minneapolis to start out my first 2 years, and in the last couple of years I pastored in St. Cloud District. Let me back up a little bit. I was born in Yonkers, New York, so I am what you call a Yankee. I was born in New York. And when I was about 10, we moved up to upstate New York. It kind of reminds me of Minnesota, so I have a lot of fond memories of New York. One of the things that really stuck with me as a child, and I'm pretty sure it sticks with many of you all as a child, possibly, is you always kind of have what your teachers or people in your life, they ask you when you're a child, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you get a lot of different answers, right? You know, you may have a child say, hey, well, I want to be a fireman, or I want to be a policeman, or I want to be a teacher, or I want to be an engineer, or I want to be an astronaut. You get all kind of answers from children. And I remember being asked it as a child a lot of what I wanted to be, especially when I was 10. And those are all good professions, might I add. But none of those professions really stuck out to me. And so I began to think, man, I get asked this a lot in school and by my family, what do I want to be? And I just kept saying, I don't really know. I got the rest of my life to figure it out. I remember a particular Christmas, for some reason, I didn't get any toys this particular Christmas. I got a whole bunch of teddy bears. And so me and my siblings were pretty upset that this particular Christmas, we didn't get any toys, but a whole bunch of teddy bears. But later that I know those teddy bears would be put to good use. How was that? Well, I remember one particular day, I had my little brother and I shared a bunk bed. And so I remember when all of my siblings were out playing in the yard, I remember taking all those teddy bears I got for Christmas, lining them up on my bunk bed, and guess what I did? I preached to them. That's a true story. I preached to them, and I envisioned those teddy bears as my congregation. And from that moment on, I knew I wanted to be a pastor. I also thought I was a little weird too. But anyway, so at that point, I believe God called me to the ministry to pastor, and ever since then, I just had the itch to preach the gospel. To fast forward many years later, God called me to Oakwood University to actually pursue education in terms of theology. So I graduated with a Minister of Theology bachelor's degree, and obviously I went to Andrews as well and got my Master's of Divinity degree. But I want to back up to Oakwood for a minute because my wife had mentioned that at that particular meeting, Mark Coleman came and he actually gave a call for those students who wanted to be student missionaries. And I remember I was on that particular committee that invited him to come out. And yes, she wanted to be a missionary. That was very, you could see it on her, it was clear, but I didn't. So I think that was an interesting thing there. I just didn't because I had my mind fixed on just being a pastor in the United States, and that's it. So I had no interest of being a missionary, but I supported all those who want to be missionaries. That just wasn't my particular lot in life. So after I finished my education, after I finished Andrews, we got a call to come here to Minnesota Conference. And the one thing I love about Minnesota Conference is everything, because they're the only ones who gave me a call. So yes, I'm very biased to the Minnesota Conference. And so I pastored here 6 years, and I want to just tell you how that story took a turn, because I've always wanted to continue to pastor here in Minnesota, but obviously things didn't work out for medical reasons. I remember one particular evangelism series I was preaching, my voice just started going completely out. And I had a few people in the church that brought it to my attention and said, Pastor, your voice doesn't sound the same. You're not preaching, not with the same authority, but your voice is not as clear. And obviously I chalked it up to, well, I've been preaching a lot. I preach every week. I'm leading out in all these kind of meetings. And so I'll just take some time off. And so that's what I did. I obviously, with consulting with the doctor, I just took some time off, and the doctor just said, hey, look, you need to rest your vocal cords. Obviously, they're just being overworked at this point. And so I took a few weeks off, and thinking that that would actually help my vocal cords, but things didn't improve. So I figured, okay, I'll just take some more time off so my vocal cords can actually function the way they're supposed to. And things did not improve. And so what ended up happening is I had my elders, I had different people come in from the conference and preach for me because I could not. And so at that point, I decided to take a medical sabbatical. And so I took about 3 months off because what the issue was going on is that my vocal cords, they're supposed to obviously open when I talk, but they were closing. And so at one point, I would say, obviously, in my journey as a pastor, professionally and even personally, I couldn't even talk. So they had to figure out what was going on with that. So during my medical sabbatical, I went to Minneapolis to do some further testing. I went to different ENT specialists to get a kind of a concrete diagnosis of what was going on with my vocal cords. And I remember after they ran all the different tests, and the doctor came back and said, okay, Pastor Kwan, we actually know what's going on with your vocal cords. And I said, okay, spill it to me, what's going on? And she said, well, you have spasmodic dysphonia. So obviously when you hear a long medical term, you're just gonna ask, what does that mean? And she said, well, she said that every single time your vocal cords wanna open, they close. And I said, okay, so what does that mean? She said, your voice will never return to the way it once was. And you're gonna have a difficult time preaching for the rest of your life. And so obviously that was not good news for me to hear, because this is how I feed my family. And this is what I love to do, and this is what God called me to do. And this is the only profession that I have. I don't have any other side hustles. I don't have any other side professions. This is what God called me to do. And so obviously leaving the hospital, remember, I never forget it, I was walking down the sidewalk with my wife, and I just began to think, God, how can you allow this to happen to me? I preached to your people, I visited your people, and in fact, there are stories of people that were called to the ministry, they decided to run the other way. I ran to your call, and you allowed this to happen to me? And so all these things were going on in my head, and I just began to think, wow, what am I gonna do next? And so what happened during that time, during my 3 months off, I had different people praying for me, my elders, my churches. We had people driving in from different states. My mentors praying for me. Just so many people were praying for me that my voice would return to the way it once was, so that I can get back in the pulpit and preach. That was my desire. But obviously that did not happen. And so I began to think, okay, God, you know how you like try to make these negotiations with God when you pray to him? I said, okay, God, if you don't want me to pastor anymore in the local church setting, what else do you have for me? But you have to keep me in ministry. I don't want to do anything outside of ministry. I just want to be in ministry. And that's when he said, how about missions? The one thing I did not want to do, he said, how about missions? And I said, yeah, local pastors, they're missionaries. Send me to another conference, no problem. Or giving my voice back so I could do what I once was. But missions, absolutely, we're all missionaries. He said, how about doing mission work overseas? I said, what? You want me to do mission work overseas? And so honestly, I didn't actually reject it. I thought about it and I said, yeah, let's do it. But the thing was, I said, you have to convince my wife. Because at that point, she had given up the idea of being a missionary, because it was so long. I told her, that's not what we're doing. This is what we're going to do. And so I would let her come up and tell the rest of how that story went.
By the time Kwan came and told me that God was saying we should go be missionaries, it had been over 10 years since I left the mission field. And I had given up the idea we were ever going overseas. I wanted to go overseas when I was younger, when we didn't have children, when we hadn't invested in life over here. By that time, we had bought a house, of course. We had our 3 kids. I was in the middle of finishing my master's program for education. We were just not setting up life to be leaving and going on the mission field, so I was a little confused. I was also a little bit mad at God. I was like, I'm the one who wanted to be a missionary all these years, and you didn't even come and tell me we're going to go be missionaries. You told him. So I had to take some time in my prayer closet, but God quickly confirmed that this was the path he had for us, and that we were no longer to be missionaries here in Minnesota, but to another land. So because I had served with AFM before, we knew right away that it should be AFM that we go back with. And we started looking at the website, and at that time we had seen an open call to Cambodia, where they were looking for a pastor and a teacher. And during this time, Kwan's voice at this point was whisper, so we didn't know how he was going to preach and be a pastor in Cambodia, but we figured if God is telling us we're to be missionaries, he will work that out in his own time. So we filled out applications for AFM, and they're very good at responding very quickly because they're always searching for missionaries. So in no time, we were doing the real application process, and we were asked to choose 3 places that we would serve. And by the time we were looking at the actual call list, Cambodia wasn't on there. So we had no idea where the Lord wanted us to serve. He just said overseas missions, but that's all he said, and we didn't hear from him again regarding that. So we were asked to choose 3 places. Because I had served in West Africa before, I said, why not East Africa? And there was an open call to Mozambique, and I was like, yay, that's nice. It was right by the ocean where we would serve. So we put that down, and then Kwan said he's always been in love with Asian culture. His name kind of sounds kind of Asian, I don't know. But that's what, so there was open call to Thailand, and so we put southern Thailand down. And then the last one took us a moment. I'm just like, all these other countries, they're not, I don't know, yes, we could serve there, but nothing was really standing out. And then Kwan said, put down Japan. And I looked at him and I said, there is no way we are going to Japan. So let's not waste our opportunity. We only get 3 choices, so let's not put down a place we're not going. And he was like, put down Japan. And I said, okay, kind of, rolling my eyes. That's not going to happen. And so we submitted that to AFM, and they were going to take a while to get back to us. And in that time, I researched Mozambique and Thailand. And during that week, I found out that Mozambique was not going to work out because at that time they had ISIS presence about 3 hours north of where we would be located. And I said, my Lord, no, we can't go there. I have 3 little babies, and no, I'm sorry. We are signing up to be missionaries, but we got to keep them safe. So Mozambique closed. And then I started researching heavily southern Thailand, because this is now our only option is Thailand. And then I realized that southern Thailand kind of resembles my home country, Jamaica, with beautiful beaches. And I said, Father, this is not going to work out. I'm going to become a beach bum, and that's not why you're calling me to overseas missions. So it just wasn't quite working out. And during that time, when I was doing my research on Mozambique and Thailand, Kwan was researching all things Japan. And one day he invited me to watch this documentary with him. And this documentary changed our lives. It was about a man who worked in Tokyo. He cleaned out the apartments of the deceased. And not just those who pass away, but those who pass away and nobody noticed for weeks. And in the documentary, the man said that he cleaned out about 3 of those apartments every week. And that broke my heart, not because of loss of life. I mean, people die every day. But in Japan, people are dying, not ever knowing Jesus. And so we knew then that the call was to Japan. We knew also that it was going to take some convincing to convince AFM to send us to Japan, because in the past we had been told that they want to send Japanese Americans to Japan to serve. So we knew it was going to take some convincing, but we knew that's where God was sending us. And he confirmed it. Right after watching that documentary, Japan just kept coming up in the strangest places. So as I said, I was doing my master's program, so I had to go do internship at a school I've never been. And we weren't sharing with people that we were thinking about being missionaries yet. And I went to this random school in this random classroom, and the teacher was talking to a colleague about a student who had graduated the year before and taken off a gap year to work at Pizza Hut. But now the student had realized their calling in life, and she's going to go be an English teacher in Japan. And so that was the first one, like, okay, God, I hear you. 'Cause nobody has talked about Japan before. Hear these random people talking about Japan. The next week, I went back for same school, different classroom, different teacher. This teacher shared with me how her daughter was graduating from college, and she's going to Japan to be a missionary that summer. And I was like, okay, I hear you. And then I was cleaning out my closet, and I found these sweatshirts that my brother had given to me like 10 years before. And on the back of these sweatshirts, they all said Tokyo, Japan. And I was like, okay, God, I got it. That's where we're going. We're going. I hear you. And I will tell you, there have been hundreds of these instances that God has said Japan clearly. The most recent one was Kwan at the Walmart in southern Rochester, where he met about 3 Japanese people, random for Rochester, and a car. He parked his car in the Walmart parking lot, went in, met 3 Japanese people, and when he came back, there was a car parked next to him that had Japanese cherry blossoms decaled all over the car. So God is clear, Japan. Anyway, last April, we went to orientation with AFM. When we got there, we were a little bit disappointed because there was a family there who they knew they were going to Japan to. God had told them clearly, but they were going because the wife was Japanese and the husband, he had served as a missionary in Japan for 6 years, so they were definitely going to Japan. And typically, AFM doesn't send 2 missionaries in the same cycle to the same country. So again, 1, they really want to send Japanese Americans. 2, there's already a missionary. But Kwan and I prayed, and we're like, we know what God has clearly told us, so we're going to tell them. Also that week, each missionary family had to do devotions. And Kwan and I were scheduled for the first morning devotion. And at this point, he's still whispering. And I asked Kwan, do you just want me to go do the devotion because you can't talk? So I can do it on my own. And he, whispered, I will do it with you. When he got to the podium, kind of like this, and he said next to me, and he opened his mouth, his voice came back. And you can hear now they're still struggling. He's getting treatment at the Mayo Clinic, but it's definitely, God has brought us a long way. So when he calls us to do what he wants us to do, he equips us. So though I don't know why it happened this way, but we walk by his will, so I know that his voice will come back to full strength so that he can do service. Anyway, by the end of the week, it was time for AFM to officially invite us to be missionaries and to give us our call. And they invited us into this room with all the AFM administration. And we sat there, and Kwan and I are holding hands. And one of the administrators said, "We just want to extend an invitation and welcome you as a part of the AFM family. And we think we know exactly where we want to send you. And if the Holy Spirit is moving, then we will be on one accord." And Kwan and I'm gripping his hand because I'm like, I know this is not going to go the way they think it's going to go. And they say, "We would like you to go to Sierra Leone." And we said, "No." And we told them, God is calling us to go to Japan. So I'll share with you now what I shared with them. So Japan is known for a strong economy, hovering between the fourth or third largest in the world. So they're doing well. Advancements in technology. We were in Japan. We just came home on Thursday. So we saw robots in our hotel. Advancements in technology for sure. Rich history and a rich culture. But underneath that, Japan is suffering from a spiritual crisis. The indigenous religion of Japan is Shinto. And the Shinto, that's going too fast. Sorry, I'll back up. The Shinto religion are known by these is the entrance to the shrine. Typically, you see them, if you Google Shinto shrine, you'll see the ones with the orange color, but the one that is down below is one that we actually took on our trip. We were just walking through Osaka, and there was the shrine. They typically build it now out of concrete. And in these shrines, what the Japanese, they do is they are seeking cleansing from their wrongdoing. The Shinto, their basis of their religion is that they worship kami, who they call them like little gods, and sometimes spirits. And we know that as Adventist Christians, we know that these are demonic spirits, and they do everything to appease these spirits. So these shrines are everywhere, all over Japan, to give the opportunity for, at your own time, because they don't gather like this in any type of service. So it's on their own time that they go and they seek cleansing from their wrongdoings and blessings from these demonic spirits so that they can help them be successful in life. The leaders of the Shinto, they are called priests. And for important things, the Shinto religion is basically what you do in this present life to get ahead. It has nothing to do with the afterlife. But the Japanese has this other religion that they have combined it with, which is Buddhism. And this has to do with everything for the afterlife. So when you think of Buddhism, you think of the statue, which is the largest Buddhist statue in Japan. You think of that statue, but they don't have one God in this religion. They have multiple gods. And what they do when they go to this temple, and their leader are called the monks, what they do is they do the ritual washing as well, but they also go next to this burner, which is at the bottom, and they get smoke, which is supposed to be healing, to take away all their ailments. And we were there at the oldest temple in Japan, Shinjoji Temple in Asasuka, and we actually watched the monks come into the pagoda and saw people burning incense. And it was just startling to see, like, this is their way of life, and they don't know who Jesus is. So, spiritual crisis, Shintoism mixed with Buddhism, and it's not just a religion to them, because if you ask a regular Japanese person what religion they have, they'll say they don't have one. Their religion is their way of life. This is what they do. There are festivals. There's a festival probably every single month that either is Buddhist or is Shinto. And it's just their practice. It's the way they do everything. It's ingrained. So when someone comes and tries to give them the gospel, it means they're, to them, erasing their identity. So it's very difficult to work in Japan. This is a video of the monks going in, and I've never seen a monk in real life, and they were parading them into the temple at that time. Spiritual crisis. Let's talk about spiritual crisis because of their way of life. So the Japanese, we talked about the third largest economy in the world. Well, that's because of capitalism. The Japanese have a great work ethic. We witnessed this while we were there. The sun rises very early in Japan, and once the sun comes up, people are headed to work. And they work all day. On the books, it says 40-hour work week, but it's probably 60-plus work hours. The Japanese, they get 2 weeks off every year for vacation, but if no Japanese person actually takes those full 2 weeks, they'll take a week and apologize for taking that time off. So they work themselves very hard. There's also secularism. So they work their hours, they work overtime, and afterwards, they go out drinking with their friends till the wee hours at night, and then they do that over again. And so that has led to a lot of issues in their society. So Hikigoromi, this actually stands for shut-ins. So in the 80s, there was an economic crisis in Japan where a lot of the graduates, they weren't able to find work. And this is a shameful thing in Japanese society, not to be able to get into the best college or into the work that you want to go into. And so what some of these individuals did was they shut themselves away in their rooms. And some of them are still there 30, 40 years later. They're shut in their rooms, not interacting with society. And then Japan also has one of the highest suicide rates in the world because of this pressure of you must be successful in education, you must be successful in your job. If you don't, you have shamed the family. So instead of shaming the family, commit suicide. And recent statistics from 2024 are showing that the suicide rate for elementary, middle, and high school students have increased because of this pressure. The picture on the bottom is a forest outside of Mount Fuji. They call it the suicide forest. And in all the alphabets of the Japan, which is 3 alphabets, the sign is saying, if you have come here to commit suicide, we're asking that you seek help instead. That forest, they uncover hundreds of bodies every year at this place. So definitely a crisis going on. So why Japan? Second largest unreached people group in the whole world. What do I mean by unreached? If missionaries don't go, they won't know. 126 million people in Japan, 1% of that number is Christian. Of Adventists, 15,000. And that number Most of them are in their 60s. We visited the Japanese church, Sapporo SDA Church, and the majority of the people in the congregation, gray hair. And something else going on with the Japanese, the young people aren't really getting married and having children. So there's no one to replace the population that is aging. And most people in Japan, they have never been to church, never read the Bible, and they don't know. They don't know a Christian. There's no one to bring the gospel because there are not enough Christians in Japan. So missionaries must do the work. So what is our mission? Well, first thing, we are hoping to launch to Japan next summer in September. So we have to go to 3 months of training starting in May, 3 full months of training of how do we even be missionaries in a foreign land. So we're gonna learn all of that, and then we're gonna launch in September. And the first thing we're gonna do is learn the language. So most Japanese do know some English. They like to pretend, as we found out, that they don't know any English at all, but they do. They all take it in middle school, but they are reluctant to speak. So yes, we can communicate with them, but Japanese is the heart language. So they believe this year alone they've had 3 million visitors to Japan. So a lot of people go there on vacation. But once you speak the language, you can then speak to their hearts and help to share the gospel. So the first thing we're gonna do is go to language school. We are thinking we will do that in Tokyo or a city close to Tokyo because they offer the best language schools, and we have to learn a lifetime of Japanese very quickly. While we are there, we're also going to do friendship evangelism, meet people. Kwan and I have already started this process, so we're very thankful that we were able to visit Japan recently and make connections already. And we want to start a discipleship movement. So those friends that we will make during our time at language school, we intend to share the gospel with them, but not just leave it there. Disciple them so that they can go and disciple others. And right now, I'm gonna ask that those I asked to hand out those flyers would hand it out, if you could do that. What you're getting is an interest form. So if you have heard our testimony of how God called us to missions and you are interested in learning more about what we're doing, I ask that you would fill that out. And I'm gonna let you know, if you put your information down, I am going to call you soon, probably tomorrow, and ask you about how you would like to help our mission. So if you could just fill that out and also put what time and what day would be better for a phone call, that would be very helpful. And I'll collect those at the end of service. But also, there are several check boxes. One of them is to receive the AFM magazine. So if you haven't received that yet, it is a free subscription for 6 months that AFM will send to you. So if you check that box, you'll get that. There is also a check box for the Kitching online newsletter, which we have already started, so you'll get updates from us. As you fill that out, I just want to share a testimony of what God did for us just last week. So as I shared, we were in Japan for our vision trip, meaning we are there to scout out the land, to see what it's like. Can we live in this foreign country that we're moving our family to? Where are we gonna live? What is the food like? All of that. So we were in Japan. We arrived in Tokyo, and we had a very busy itinerary. We were basically going to take the Shinkansen, the bullet train, all over Japan and see these places and see where we would like, where God was calling us to live. So we took a bullet train to this small town called Aomori, and our intention was to take the bullet train to Hokkaido, which is the northern prefecture. However, the night before that trip, I realized there is no bullet train to Hokkaido. Even though it's only 2 hours away, there is no bullet train there. The only way there was a very slow 6.5-hour train ride, the local train. And after being on an 11.5-hour flight, I said, no, we cannot do that. So we looked for tickets to fly from where we were to Sapporo, which is the city we were going to in Hokkaido. And thankfully, there was an airport nearby, and thankfully, the tickets were not very high. So we booked a ticket the night before to go to Sapporo. It was going to be a 50-minute flight. We got to the airport very early, like we do in the States. Like, we were there 3 hours early, and we realized nobody else is there because security is not that high. So, and leaving that small town, we didn't need all the time. We could have actually came 20 minutes before our flight and still made it. But anyway, we got into Sapporo, and the train that we were going to take to get into the city, there were like 300 people waiting for this train. And if you know anything about Japan, their train system works very fast. There is no waiting. But lo and behold, there was this line. And Kwan said, let's take a taxi, because I'm tired. And I said, I agree. And we went to stand in the taxi line. There's a line for everything in Japan. And you just stand in it, and you do what they do. And while standing in the taxi line, we realized, like, the taxis aren't all lined up. They come one by one, and they take a group. And we're like, this is going to take forever. And so Kwan said, let's take the bus. And by this time, we had tried the train, we had tried the taxi, and I was like, you know what, okay, fine. We'll just do the bus. So we went and stood in the line for the bus. And then this Japanese man said hello to me. And I said, hello. And I asked him, I said, Ego wa wakarimasu ka, which means, do you understand English? And he replied, skoshi, which means a little. And because I've studied a bit of the Japanese culture, I realized, yeah, he understands more of a little. So we stuck up a conversation. He started talking to me and Kwan and asked, where are we from? And we were talking to him. We get on the bus, and he saves us seats. And we're like, okay, go with the flow. He saves us seats at the back of the bus, and we sit next to him. And we talked for over an hour and a half on this bus trip. And we got to share with him that we're thinking of moving to Japan, and should we live in Sapporo? And he's like, yes, I'm from Sapporo. I was born here. It's wonderful. And so we asked him, what's Sapporo like? And he's like, it has 4 seasons, but it snows a lot. And then we showed him a picture of Minnesota and our kids playing with the snow, and he's like, oh, it snows a lot there too. And we had a lengthy conversation. He asked us, why are you moving to Japan? And I said, well, we were told. And he said, who told you? God? And I said, yes, God told us to move to Japan. So we're having this wonderful conversation. We exchanged contact information, and we think that's going to be the end of it. We have found, because I had prayed, Lord, give us one. Just give us one while we're in Japan. And then he invites us to lunch with him. And so we're getting off the bus. In Japan, the easiest way to get around is to have a card that has money on it. And so we go to pay to get off the bus, but our cards wouldn't let us off the bus. So our Japanese is not very good. I'm trying to explain to the driver that there's money on the card. Please let us off, or tell us how much it is, and we'll pay you. And the elderly man, his name is Yatsu, he comes back on the bus and talks to the guy for us and opens his wallet and pays our fee. And I'm like, you don't really have to do that. But he did it anyway and said nothing of it. And then, so he got us off the bus. He leads us to the place where we're gonna eat. He wanted to go eat sushi. And then I tried to explain to him that we don't eat shellfish or urchins or all these other things. And he's like, oh, that's not gonna work for us. So he took us to a different place where we could find something to eat. And then because he had paid for us to get off the bus, my intention is that we're gonna pay for the meal. And he wouldn't let us pay for it. We learned later that if they invite you out to lunch, they are going to pay. And at lunch, we had a beautiful conversation about the Lord. We learned that he's an atheist, but we know that more than likely Yetsu will be one of our first Japanese converts to Christianity. So we are going to Japan. We're going to do this. Malachi 1:11. From the rising of the sun to the setting, my name will be great among the nations, and in every place incense are offered in my name, and pour an offering. For my name will be great among the nations, say the Lord. Japan is the land of the rising sun. US is the land of the setting sun. It sets over Hawaii. God is saying his name will be praised from where the sun rises to where it sets. And I am so happy that God has called my family to be a part of this. And he hasn't just called us. God is rising up an army for the Japanese. So that family I told you, they were going to Japan. We were approved, they were approved. Right now, there is a couple, the Babiancos, they're already launched. There's their platinum missionary who is a Japanese person. She's there with them. There's a young lady, Karima David from the UK. She's in training right now to launch in Japan. So God, where this nation has been so closed for so long, God has just said, it's time now, I'm coming. So my missionaries are going. So I'm so happy to be a part of that. And I would say this, I spoke about my grandmother who had that dream. My grandma always said, Camille, when I die, don't think that I'm going to be in my grave some 20, 30 years. When I die, know that God is coming soon. So I see the signs, but I know he's coming soon because my grandma, she passed away last October. So now we're on borrowed time, and there is a mission. God wants all his people to be saved, and he's not going to leave the Japanese without the gospel. They have to hear it. So what do we need from you? What do we need from Dodge Center Church? Well, we need you to get involved. Make mission your passion. I see that you guys are already doing this. I see the sign for Kenya. So I hear you. So pray. Pray. We need people who are going to be prayer warriors on our behalf. Japan has been this dark land. They have had missionaries before. They developed this horrible reputation as the graveyard of missionaries because of what they used to do to their missionaries in time past. But it's also a graveyard still because it is so hard to win converts for Jesus, because it truly, becoming Christian, like, they have to give up all they've ever known, their way of life. So I ask that you would pray for us as a family and for the other missionaries who are going, but also pray for the Japanese people. They're people who have waited their whole lives. Yetsu, the man that we met on the bus, he is in his late 60s. I think the meal we had with him was the first time he's ever encountered Christians. There are people waiting their whole lives for people to come, so please pray for them. Also, if you cannot go, as many of us can't, support missionaries who are going to these faraway lands. And after service, if you are feeling called to support us, then I will have that information for you. And last but not least, if you feel like God is calling you to the mission field, then I ask that you would answer the call and go. Go and be a missionary for Jesus. It will be the best thing that you will ever do in your life. God called me when I was a young woman. Kwan waited until he was a little older to accept that call, but there is a calling on each of our lives to serve. So I ask that you will answer that call. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to share our testimony, and thank you to your pastor and your leadership. May God bless you all.